Headstand is an important posture that comes into many stages. So depending on how comfortable you feel, we're going to just go from stage 1 and build it up to, or stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, to build it up to the full headstand. Now, Shirshasana is known as the king of asanas, so it is quite important. And also the queen of asanas is known as Shalamba Sarvangasana. That's the shoulder stand. So with headstand, being in an inverted position can actually be very healthy for the body. So usually we're either upright or we're laying down when we sleep, but rarely are we totally inverted. So this is really good for the circulation, good for the thyroid, great for your immune system. And so spending some time upside down is really quite healthy for the body. So the setup is really important. What we're going to do is just to get the arms in the right distance. So what we're working on with this base, the setup of the arms, is that we're making essentially a tripod. So I'm going to have my arms in place and then the head down. So this creates a nice base. One thing that's really important is that we don't want the elbows out too wide, because that will again narrow our base. So we want to have a good distance between the arms. How we do that is going to be by clasping the elbows, and depending on our proportion, that's going to give us a proper distance to start with. So I'm going to just bring the arms down and clasp the elbows like so, and wherever the elbows are from this clasp position, I'm going to release the hands and then keep the elbows where they are, and then bring my hands forward, and then I want to interlace the fingers in this position. Okay, so this is a really good tripod position. Essentially, it's kind of making a triangle, and then my head is going to come down and cradle into the hands. Now, the thing with the hand position here is sometimes with the pinky under, it creates a little bit of an unstable platform because there's just this one finger kind of hanging there. So what I recommend is tucking that pinky under, so only the outer edges of the hand are grounded on the floor. So we don't feel that teetering of that pinky down under, and then what happens is one hand is a little higher than the other when the pinky is there. So just tuck that under, and then just have both outer edges of the hand equally grounded on the floor. I'm going to have the thumbs up. The thumbs are going to be part of like cradling my head. Now, when it comes to the head position, when I bring it down, it will take a little bit of trial and error to find your sweet spot. So in the practice, I've come to a point where I just bring the head down. I know exactly where to go. If you're new to headstand, it's going to take a little bit of an adjustment to, again, find that sweet spot. So usually a good place to start with is if you feel the crown of your head, wherever your, when babies have that growth of their hair coming, or that soft spot of their skull, it's kind of like in that part that we call the crown. You want to bring 3, or depends on your finger width, but it's anywhere from 2 to 3 fingers forward from that position. Again, it's also going to depend on your shoulder flexibility. It's going to depend on a little bit how your neck curves. That's why I always say that it may take a bit of trial and error to really feel where that sweet spot is. Okay, so that's going to be important. So let's go ahead and get the placement of the hands correct. So I'm going to clasp the elbows, open up my forearms, I'm going to interlace the fingers and tuck the pinky under. Now I'm just going to bring the head down. And what we're going to do first is just get used to being upside down. So we're going to be holding the headstand while keeping the feet on the floor to get used to being in an inverted position. So I'm going to drop the head down and just kind of feel out where I want to be on my head. And I also want to feel that my hands are holding the head, but I want to ground the forearms down. So there should be 2/3 of the weight in the arms and 1/3 of the weight in the head.
The other thing that's important before I start to lift my hips is I want to move the shoulders away from the floor. We don't want the shoulders to sink down toward the floor. That will also create compression in the neck area. So I want to create that space, move shoulders away from the floor, curl the toes under, and then straighten the legs. Now what we'll do from this position is just experiment with walking forward. Just walk until you can't walk any further. Continue to move the shoulders away from the floor. Ground your forearms down, and let's breathe here. So you may feel that your shoulders want to collapse. Try to resist that and keep the shoulders moving away from the floor. Let's take a few more breaths here. Okay, let's step back. And let's go ahead and bend the knees and sit back on the feet. Just keeping the head dropped for a few breaths. Or you can bring the forehead all the way down to the floor.
Good. So that's going to be the first phase to work with. So just keeping the feet down. That might be the edge that you'll need to work with for a few days, a few weeks. It just really depends on the person. You don't want to go into the next phase until you feel really solid in the first phase. So the second phase is going to be to again walk the hands in toward your body, in toward your head, and then we're going to lift one leg in a bent leg position and then switch and lift the other, just to kind of get used to starting to bear a bit more weight over the arms. So this is going to be the second stage, and then we're going to also go through the third stage, which is going to be to actually elevate the feet. What we're trying to do is to get the hips to go over the shoulders, and what you'll even notice is that the hips will go beyond the shoulders to create that lightness of the feet when they start to lift. So once my hips are stacked over the shoulders or beyond, the legs actually feel really light to lift. If I fall short of that, it's going to feel heavy and you'll want to just fall forward. So let's set up our arms, clasping the elbows, opening up the forearms, interlacing the finger, and tucking the bottom pinky under. Head down. Curl the toes under, lift your hips, and start to walk the feet toward the head till you can't walk anymore. Ground your forearms down into the floor, and then let's just lift one leg. Good. Continue to resist that sinking of the shoulders. So shoulders moving away from the floor. And let's go ahead and switch. Now, you might, if you feel comfortable, if you feel stable, you can then come to the ball of this foot that's on the mat, and then see if you can lift into a bent leg position. So I'm bringing my feet together, my knees together, my legs together, coming to the center line of the body. When I bring the legs to the center line of the body, it's much lighter to hold. If I start to separate the feet and the legs, it's going to be much more unstable. So bring the legs together and feel your way here. Now to come down, I want to stay concentrated and grounded through the forearms, and I'm going to just slowly just drop the feet to the floor, and then drop the knees, and then sit back on my heels. Keep the head dropped just so your head and your neck, well, especially the neck, can come into a more neutral space, and the blood flow as well, so you don't feel too lightheaded lifting your head up too soon. Okay, so what we're going to do for the next stage for headstand is to walk in and lift both feet up at the same time into a bent knee position. Then we're going to be in a good space to then go up into a straight leg position. What I recommend is that when you're straightening the legs, to lift the legs very, very slowly, because you're going to notice a little bit of calibration in the body. So if you make really big movements, your body might not be able to react and find the balance. So if you make micro movements, like small movements going upward, then your body can calibrate and feel the balance. So I always recommend moving very slowly, especially if you're new to this. Now, many people ask me if it's okay to work with a wall. And the thing that I resist with using the wall is that we're always trying to overbalance to then balance off the wall. And that can create some not so great habits. I find that it's good to just really work it out without the wall, because then we're understanding how that balance works in a more true essence. Because again, using a wall, we tend to go beyond that balance and then come back from a balance from this extended position, overextended position. Now, whenever you do any type of inversion, the risk of falling will always be there. And there's not one person who's attempted headstand and has not fallen. So I know that seems like a very scary thing. When you're practicing at home, always make sure that you have a clean space. What I have found, like teaching many students to practice, is when they fall, there's a tendency not to get hurt when you're in an open space. Anyone that I've known who's injured themselves from falling, it's because they fall on top of something that's an obstruction. So a clean space is going to be a safe space. So just make sure that when you are practicing your headstand, that there's nothing obstructing any area that you could fall into. So let's go ahead and set up for this next stage. I will demonstrate. So I'm doing the same exact arm position that I mentioned before. I'm going to bring my head down, curl the toes under, straighten the knees. I'm going to start to walk. I'm going to walk toward the head until I can't walk anymore. So this is bringing my hips beyond the shoulders. Then from here, I'm just going to slowly bend the knees, keeping the knees together and just feeling that balance. I'm grounding the elbows down, the forearms down, and then lifting the shoulders away from the floor. From here, I'm going to straighten my legs, but I'm going to work very, very slowly so I can react naturally to the shift of weight and I can feel the balance. When the legs are extended, I want to continue to draw the legs together. I want to engage my legs and point the toes. If the legs are out here and I'm bent and wobbly, it's going to be much more unstable. So drawing the legs together toward the center as I engage the legs makes them feel lighter to hold and easier to manage. So always have a nice extended, engaged leg. What we're building up to in the practice is to be able to hold for a full 15 breaths. That takes time, it takes stamina, and it takes getting used to the balance. So there's no rush, but we do want to continue to challenge ourselves and do our best to practice our headstand as much as possible, remembering that it's the king of asanas. After 15 breaths, we also come into a halfway position, a 90-degree position. So you don't want to do the 90-degree position unless you can hold straight for 15 breaths. So we need to walk before we run. That's really important. So you don't have to attempt the 90-degree position until you really feel you can comfortably hold for 15 steady, calm breaths. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate this position. So I'm going to lower down to 90 degrees. Now, when I do this, the weight will be a little heavier, so I have to continue to move the shoulders away from the floor, away from my ears.
I'm going to point the toes and engage my legs. Again, if I'm wobbly like this, it's hard to manage this position, to manage the weight. And we're supposed to hold here for 10 breaths. You might feel that you run out of energy when first attempting this, or you might lose the balance. That's okay, it just takes practice to be able to make it up to this point. After 10 breaths here in the 90-degree position, we actually take ourselves back up all the way, working slowly to a full Shirshasana. And then we're going to lower all the way down. So when we lower down, I just do my best to keep the legs moving slowly. You can go straight legs, you can go bent legs. Both can work. So I'm just going to demonstrate bent legs because that's how I got up into the pose. I'm going to bend the legs, dropping the knees first, and then dropping the feet. I'm going to drop my knees, and then I'm going to sit back on the heels, keeping the head down, and just breathing a few rounds of breath, keeping the head down so my neck can come back to a more comfortable space because it's been very static in that balanced pose. But also, this is good for the blood pressure, so the blood can just flow more naturally. If we whip the head up too soon, it can possibly make us feel a little bit lightheaded. So I'm just going to take a few more breaths.
Okay, so really good practice today. Hopefully working with the headstand and the stages that we covered will help us to feel more comfortable in the posture.